that you liked it. I think that means you liked it.
I think that means I like you.
Aw.
These are your peeps right here.
They definitely are my
Yeah.
peeps.
Well, I do have lots of questions I'd love to ask you about your career and your
Do they get to ask
They get to
anything?
ask questions too, but I thought we are here to talk about your new film first and foremost, and you all saw the trailer just now. I wonder if you could just start by telling us a little bit about what drew you to this particular film. You have choices, I'm assuming, and you decided this was a film you wanted to
Well,
be a
I
part
do
of.
have a lot of choices, but I wasn't dying. I wasn't help someone die. Didn't have Alzheimer's. It was like the choices that you get at a certain point. You know, you don't get too many love stories, and I found it just. Usually when I pick up a script within the first 6 pages, I know exactly what's going to happen. And this one twisted and turned, and then I met Lorene, and Lorene was so passionate about making this because, of course, it's a very personal film. And then she sent me, so I met with her, I really liked her, and then I got this little 5-minute sizzle reel that was her actual mother doing exactly the opening of the film, the first 5 minutes of the film, all the dialogue shot by shot. And she was just so funny and eccentric and authentic, and, you know, I just was sold completely. And then we had to find the money. It was done in 23 days for not even $3.5 million. So getting Rose Byrne, who's a friend of mine, and J.K. Simmons were gifts. I was really afraid. He had committed to it, and then he won the Academy Award, and I called up Lorene. I said, so is he still going to do it? I don't know. Is he still? And she said, yeah, he's still in, and that helped get the rest of the money. And then, it just... I think everybody, you don't have to lose a spouse to understand what it's like to be put in a situation where you have to start over. And she's, I wore all of her clothes. Well, you didn't see the whole movie, but wait till you see the wardrobe. Everything is some kind of leopard or some kind of animal print or butterflies or something. But she's so, New York, in LA, you just see the whole time what a misfit she is, but she has such a great spirit and such a generosity, and she was so funny, and so I just thought this is great, and I was pleased that I had no problem keeping up the pace that it involved, because we were working really fast and furiously.
And you're in every scene, it seems.
Yeah, pretty much.
So
yeah,
it's a lot of work for you. You once said in an interview that you don't want to make a movie about a mom who makes no mistakes. You were drawn more to that flawed character. Wondering if you could talk about that in the context of this story and this mom.
I think everybody, even when you have a Sister Helen who seems so heroic, that it's just not interesting playing somebody who's perfect. I love women. I love all the different kind of moms that I've played, and they're all flawed. Who isn't flawed, and all so different. And I think what's interesting is to find people that seem ordinary, and then when you really get to know them, they do extraordinary things. And in this woman's life, just a tiny bit of a change is really a lot. And I love doing love stories. Every film that I've ever done has, to me, always been some kind of a love story, because I just find it's the most courageous thing you can possibly do is to connect with another person, make yourself vulnerable to them, to try in some way to be intimate. I don't even mean sexually, but just vulnerable to another human being. And so she just is so traumatized when she spent her entire life nurturing her husband and being there for her husband, and really loves her husband, really loves doing for her husband. And then that's taken away, and she has to try to figure out where to put all this nurturing energy. And anybody that comes within her path kind of gets it, if they're needy, she just does it, and I don't mind her being inappropriate that way. I mean, I wish everybody was inappropriate in an overabundance of kindness, but it can be quite grating when you're her kid, and especially with cell phones, which make you accessible all the time.
Well, it's a great device in the film, actually, the way that the cell phones are used, which I won't give away too much, but I thought it was actually terrific.
Yeah, I hope you see it. I hope you're not satisfied with just this little. I hope you go see it.
We'll show you another clip in a second, and I just want to remind people that the film is actually opening Friday in New York, so please try to check it out.
Vote on Tuesday.
Yeah, vote tomorrow, number
Everybody
one.
vote tomorrow, and then go to see the movie on Friday.
Exactly. When you see a role like this, also that's a woman who's an older woman, and do you find that there are many opportunities that you have to play a fully realized older woman who's sexual and?
No, not at all. No, I don't think so. I don't. I don't know if they're going to somebody else. I don't know if you've seen probably a lot of films. I don't think people think to write that. It was that's why it was such a gift, you know, and JK is adorable and just so different than you've seen him in anything. And so it was when you do something, you try not to judge. You know, you don't want to be judging your character. You don't want to be trying to also be sympathetic. You just kind of try to make it as we were trying to ground it as realistically as possible and not comment on the comedy. But then when I saw it, the first time I had to loop some lines, I thought, oh my God, she's crazy. She's like so annoying and weird, and he's so patient. But I guess, you know, you kind of understand, I'm told, that she does it from the goodness of her heart, and so people forgive that annoying part of it.
In fact, let's just show a clip here really quick with JK, the chicken man scene. I'd like to call it that. James Wolfe is on, and our projection booth is going to cue it up.
We've been up all night. I mistakenly ate a lot of pot.
This is in the movie. This is the movie.
It is in the movie.
Not real life.
And, well, maybe that too. That's not the chicken.
That's chicken.
And I wander into a film set, into filming, and they think I'm an extra, and I just kind of go with it, and I meet him. And he learned to play the guitar and to ride a motorcycle for the movie. He does both very convincingly.
I was going to say he just learned to play the guitar for the movie? That's
Yeah, he sings really well. He had been singing before, but there's a whole thing about Dolly Parton and the chickens, so that's really intriguing, isn't it?
There are a lot of people from Brooklyn with chickens, but not as many from Manhattan, I think. Well, I mean, I have to say that he's so terrific. He's a terrific actor. But you play so well together, and I think you are very authentic and original with each other. But you are a kind of fish out of water, aren't you, in the film? Have you ever lived in Los Angeles?
Not willingly. I've always gone with a job. I'll be there. I'm going to do something for many months in the fall. So that'll be the first time in a long time that I've been there for a while. And I've lived in different places. I've never quite figured out how everything connects, but I went either when I had to work or I had the kids when Tim was working. But it's not, I have more of a sense of humor about it now. I was kind of appalled in the beginning, but because it just seemed so corporate, and that was many, many years ago, and of course it's only gotten more in the business. But being such a company town, I even when I'm working, I feel like my career is over. because you become so self-aware because everybody's watching everything, and you have to be so social, and the serendipity that you have in New York just doesn't exist there. If you run into somebody, you've hit them with your car. It's just very little time that you're on your feet doing anything. And I'm so used to walking, and I was born in New York, and I raised my kids in New York, and I've been here forever, ever, ever. So it's an adjustment for me. I have one son that's out there now. I have another son that's in Clinton Hill, and my daughter just moved to Westchester. So I've got two on this coast, but he's a filmmaker, and he likes it out there. So I go out, but I wouldn't count it as living there, just mostly working.
How do you feel, or do you feel that has had an effect on your career, not being a New York-based actor?
Well, I mean, that's not the way you're supposed to do it, for sure. And but I think it helped me stay grounded, and it helped. This is if you're in a job where everybody's going to be paying attention to everything you do, and it's nice to be in a town where that's not the only game in town, and that's. New Yorkers are so cool. They're just like, hey, how you doing? They don't like go, and if I were in LA, I'd be behind a gate, and my kids would, be with all other horrible Hollywood kids, and the only languages they would hear that would be different would be people that work for you. And I just didn't feel that I was vigilant enough to give them, as privileged kids, I want them to know they're privileged and not think that's ordinary. And certainly when you're here and you see all kinds of families and all kinds of languages and all, especially downtown, which is where they were raised, I don't know. I just felt it was the best for them. They have a great sense of humor. New York kids have the best sense of humor, and they're out on their own at 10, or you're not driving them everywhere, so they can, for better or worse, they have fewer places to have sex because they don't have cars. But they definitely can roll with just about anything, especially downtown kids. And two of my kids went to St. Anne's for high school, but everybody was downtown, and I don't know. New York just suits me, and I love coming back to New York. The spirit of what's going on now, politically is just the best, and you just, everyone being engaged and kind of having these conversations is just what I love about the city. And I don't think, I feel like the biggest gift I've given my kids has been to grow up in New York, because they're adaptable, they're flexible. Their idea of what the world is so huge. Yeah. And they, where else can you learn Japanese in school? In high school, it's crazy. So I've always been a New Yorker, but I've gone there to work, and as I said, I have a sense of humor about it now that I didn't have when I was much younger. Because I would walk everywhere. I think the first time I went to LA, I was working on Front Page, and I was staying at the Chateau Marmont before it was really cool, and everyone was photographing everything that was going on there. And I would walk around, and constantly be stopped because they thought I was a hooker. And I don't even think, because nobody walked in Hollywood, they really don't walk. And because I wasn't even dressed provocatively or anything. It was just like, what are you doing walking? And and I've never really acclimated to being in a car that much. My daughter tells me that she likes the time in the car, and every time I'm in the car, of course, it takes 40 minutes or more to get everywhere, and every time they say, "Oh, it's never like this." Yeah. Mom, really, it's never like this. I'm like, yeah, at 2 o'clock in the morning maybe, but really, it's always like this, and that drives me crazy. I don't like spending that much time in traffic.
Having lived out there myself for a short time, I can agree with all those things. I think the thing as a New Yorker is the interaction is what you miss, right? That's the spice of life here, is that we all interact.
Again, having to plan everything, every dinner. If I always have a hard time on Sundays. For some reason, Sundays, I just get very melancholy. I go out, everyone looks like they're in love. I hate them for that. Everyone seems like they're having such a good time. But you can walk around and find a gallery you didn't know existed. You can walk around and see the movie that's playing, or wander into a coffee shop. You know, I mean, they're just, you're bombarded once you're on foot. And then if you go to Brooklyn, you know, even more stuff that you didn't like Clinton Hill is a whole other neighborhood I didn't know that much about that I really love. And, you know, now, the High Line is one of my favorite things ever, and all the galleries that have opened there. So you can go out, and also, you know, when I've gone through really challenging times and I can't sleep over there, I would just speed walk down the West Side Highway all the way, you know, during the path that's on the West Side. At 12 o'clock at night in the summer, there's people all around. Boom boxes are going. You know, I feel totally safe, and just to be able to get out and walk. So the city really suits me, and I love. Maybe it suits me because I also leave. And I don't feel trapped, and I, you know, can get some green and a change of, and come back. But I'm always happy when I come back. I'm always so proud to be a New Yorker.
Well, we're happy to have you, of course. I wanted to ask a question about what the industry was like when you started. Some of your first films are independent films. Atlantic City is really an independent film. Even Rocky Horror is an independent film. Well, what was this industry like for a young woman starting out in the early 70s?
Well, I mean, I don't think, maybe it was just me, but it didn't encourage you to be as self-aware in a bad sense. I mean, the packaging wasn't as significant of who you were. And like I said, I kind of fell into the business. It wasn't that I ever wanted to be an actor. I didn't study acting. With Joe, I just kind of fell into it. And I thought, well, this is funny. And then I got another job, and I was like, oh, that's really funny. I can pay off my school debt. And I don't think you could get away with it that way anymore. I mean, I think it's such an industry. I think that you used to have studio heads who were personalities who liked making film. They didn't have a banker's head. The corporate takeover of everything has changed everything. But definitely in the business, you have bankers making decisions. They cast people according to how many followers they have, all of this kind of stuff that's going on now. It seemed more impersonal in LA than it had when I was in New York, but nothing compared to the way it is now. And but then on the other hand, there's a lot of different ways to make film. There's even more distribution now than there was in the middle period. But you definitely were told. I mean, I knew that my career would be over at 40. You definitely didn't play a mother. All of these pieces of advice. There was as much sexual harassment, certainly, or more. Yeah. But nobody knew to file a lawsuit about it. I mean, that just wasn't happening. But it was kind of part of what you would run into, for sure. I don't know. I mean, I had kind of an odd career because I was almost reluctant, and but it was definitely the agencies that were doing everything didn't feel like they were probably going to be part of the UN tomorrow. You know, I mean, now they're so massive and they handle so much stuff, and they handle sports and video games, and they're corporations in themselves, the agencies that handle people. And I don't know, there's so much TV now. There's a lot more TV. I guess there's more chance that way to do things. I never was really interested. When I first did Front Page, for instance, when I got the job, they asked me to sign a contract that guaranteed that I had to do 4 more films without having any script approval. And I said I just couldn't do that. And I lost the job. And then I called Billy Wilder, and I explained to him that the reason that I wasn't doing it was not because of money or anything, but was because of this. And then a few weeks later, I got the job again. But that was something that was very typical, you know, asking you to be indentured to a studio for a while without any say. So, which was the continuation of all those gals. You know, Betty Davis tried to fight against that. All of them did, but there was still the remnants of that in the beginning in the 70s. But I did the first few of my films just from New York, somehow. I don't know.
As long as we're talking about that, I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about Burt Lancaster, if you don't mind, since we're at the Film Society.
No, I love Burt. Well, Atlantic City was funny because there was a script that existed that was Canadian money and a Canadian script that I knew John Guare, and I introduced Louis to him, and he decided to place it in Atlantic City, and he rewrote quite a bit of it. And when they tried to prove that it wasn't all his, he won the suit. So it definitely was his creation. And it was the first time that Burt Lancaster had appeared older. You know, he had to whiten his hair even more than it was. And Louis was always trying to mess him up and make him, but so sweet, and really took he didn't have I was the director's girlfriend as much as he knew, and he was always in a mode of kind of trying to teach you something. You know, that was his kind of 50s version of, and when it came time for the scene where he talks to me and describes looking at me voyeuristically, and I come and kneel down and kind of offer myself. He was very disturbed by the idea that he said, you know, my fans really expect me to take her and throw her down, you know, and do that, not like this other dynamic. And it was in the script described as she comes toward him like a deer in the headlights as he's talking. And so Louis wasn't comfortable all the time talking to actors. He would manipulate them in other ways, like have the camera going before he said it was going, or have it continue after he said cut. And but he sent me to explain it to Burt and how it was going to be blocked differently. And to his credit, he did it the way it was written, despite the fact that it wasn't comfortable for him. And years later, I had his telephone number, and years later, after he did the Scottish director's film, what was that one called? With Peter Riegert, what was it? Local Hero, thank you. He did Local Hero, and I saw it, and I thought he was so good in it, and I called him up, and I said, oh, I just saw Local Hero, and you're so great, and I just wanted to call and tell you that, and blah, 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 blah. And he said, well, thank you very much, and I hung up, and then he called me back, and he said, you know, I didn't even ask you how you are. He said, nobody ever tells me anymore that I'm great. You know, he said, I guess they just take that for granted. And he said, I was just so thrown by your phone call. I just wanted to call back and find out how you were. But yeah, I was thinking, I guess when you're an icon like that, you know, people do just treat you like a mountain or something that's just there perfectly. And they don't necessarily tell you that you really did a great job. Good job, Burt.
Well, he's from a whole other era. And I think,
but he was the first one that had a production company, the first actor that had a production company, and he hired, you know, his friends, and he started with that pirate movie, and also when you look at his career, it's astounding how the different Birdman of Alcatraz or Come Back Little Sheba, you know, for this strapping, gorgeous guy, he took some real chances, and I don't think he got enough credit for that, because he really did try some different stuff he didn't have to.
Absolutely. I think we'll take some questions from our audience, but please just wait for the microphone to arrive. So Harrison is up here. There's someone right in the front. I'm going to make it really hard for you, Harrison. That's what I was just thinking. But thank you.
I'm curious, as your career has gone on, what have been a moment when you had a confrontation either in what you had to do or what you didn't want to do, you know, where you had to go through it?
Yeah, there have been some moments. Let me see. Who can I talk about that's not going to be upset? Well, it was pretty funny on The Tempest. I don't know if you saw The Tempest, but Paul Mazursky, and it was Jenna Rollins and John Cassavetes, and I, it's loosely based on The Tempest, and I play Ariel, and so John Cassavetes' mistress, and she travels all over the Greek islands and everything. So I wanted to be kind of, with boots on, and Paul wanted me in high heels, and then there was a whole thing about that I didn't really love John. This was during the rehearsal period. Molly Ringwald was 11. That's how long ago this was. And I didn't really love him, and it just got worse and worse and worse and worse, and I cut off all my hair trying to get fired. And that didn't work. Paul just took a minute and then didn't fire me. And then the rehearsals were still getting worse and worse and worse, because for me it was really important that I cared about him. So I went to John, was staying at the Wyndham Hotel with Jenna, and I said, I just came by to tell you that I really can't stay in this any longer. We're just on, I can't go to Greece and be there and do this movie, because I think the character really loves you, and that's a very basic thing for me. And he says that's not true, and I have to sing Hava Nagila, and he wants me in high heels, and I just don't think I just don't want to do this. And he said, if you leave me, I will break your legs. Which was not what I expected to hear. And I was like, oh, he said, look, seriously, you have to come. You can't not come. You have to come. We don't have to listen to him. He said, well, you can love me. Don't listen to him. He's just the director. Don't listen to him. You'll love me. We'll have a great time. Just come on. I was, okay, I guess I'll do that. So then we did it. And we were all stuck on the Mani Peninsula for a number of months in the fall in Greece, and it was pretty funny. And I learned a lot from that. And, Raul Julia was very playful, and Molly Ringwald and I were working up all these acts, which one of them ended up in the movie. And Paul still was kind of harassing me, but and we got into a big that was the other thing. This was so stupid. I don't know what was wrong with me, but all I was wearing was a pair of white underpants and a T-shirt. I don't know how many movies I did without a bra, but for some reason that was very in at the moment, not to have a bra on. So I had on a T-shirt and a pair of underpants, very tan, and he says to me, no, you've got to change those pants. They're too on the nose. And I was like, what? And he said, yeah, those, and it turned into some kind of a power struggle or something. And we got into a little bit of a fight, and it was already a difficult scene. And I remember just taking them off and throwing them at him and storming off and thinking, what did you just do? Are you so stupid walking bare ass off this set? What is wrong with you? And I don't remember if we got another pair of underpants. I guess we did, but I mean, it was just the culmination of like a very awkward scene and being in this hammock in a weird way and everything else. But it was ultimately a fun job. And he, it didn't end up, everybody was giving him a hard time. And so we finally had what we did was, Paul really wanted to be an actor. So we had a talent show where he could do a stand-up routine and get it all out. And we all had little things that we did. Vittorio Gassman read a poem and then jumped and rolled over like 5 guys shoulder to shoulder on the ground. I mean, it was just insane. And but when you're stuck all together and these are the only people you have, this is what happens. You find ways to amuse yourself.
It's quite a cast of personalities, so to be stuck on an island with.
Yeah. It was great though.
Anyone else? Question over there, this gentleman.
Hi. I'm a particularly big fan of Who Am I This Time? And I was just wondering what you think of the film. I assume you love it, and what it was like to work with Chris Walken and Jonathan Demme.
Oh, yeah. Actually, Kurt Vonnegut said that it's the best interpretation of anything that he's ever written, and that does have we did it very fast outside of Chicago, and it was interesting because the first day of shooting, Jonathan asked for some kind of a complicated shot, and the DP just laughed at him because he was wearing a Hawaiian shirt, was this guy that nobody knew who he was, right? And that, he had to do one of those moments, is there something funny? Do you want to share that with the class? And so there was this tension, and then when they saw the dailies, they came round. But I don't think you've ever seen Chris Walken do anything like that. He's just so sweet and lovable and fun. He's always funny. But before he became kind of a Saturday Night Live caricature of Chris Walken, he plays this sweet character who only exists when he's on stage, because he was left on the steps of the Unitarian Church and he doesn't know who his family was, so he has no personality and is very shy, and then has the lead in every community theater production of everything. So we're doing Streetcar Named Desire, and he does every cliche of Stanley, ripping his shirt, everything he goes by, he crashes, and I'm the girl that's come in to put in a computer system into the phone company, and I end up playing Stella, and I won't tell you what happens, but it was really fun, really, really fun to do, and I like it. I think it's a little gem. It's an odd little thing, but he's so sweet in it. Thanks for asking about that. I don't know where people see that. I guess you can find anything, right? Who Am I This Time? It was done for TV, I think, yeah.
How you doing? I read this amazing interview you did. You were talking about David Bowie, and I was wondering if you might have anything else you might want to tell us. How he, basically how he influenced your life.
Well, that's pretty personal because we were together for a number of years, but I think he's influenced a lot of people's lives since he's passed. A lot of people have told me that he meant so much to them. I met him in a more stable period of his life, when we were doing The Hunger, and then we were together for the Serious Moonlight Tour in a period around there, and I think he was a very private person and a very, just incredibly graceful. He was like, Fred Astaire or something, and the fact that he found Iman who matched him in his alien quality, because she's almost like someone's avatar or something. She's so beautiful, and at the same time she's so dignified, and also I think really was wonderful for in terms of him building his life. I think one of the things that was funny about David was when he that he was very traditional when it came to his kids, especially the youngest one that he had with Iman. We were talking about schools at some point when she was really little, and I was talking about Little Red and some of the other ones, and he wasn't so, he was looking for structure and a more traditional. I couldn't believe it. It's always those guys that go off, turn on you at the end and become really straight. I was like, seriously, are you kidding? Because I'd had kids in almost every school. At some, everybody started in Friends Seminary. Someone went to Little Red, someone up to Columbia Prep, two in St. Anne's, so I was the expert on schools, and he just was rejecting any kind of progressive education. But I think she ended up going downtown, and toward the end, I thought it was really beautiful that he had this, because I saw him I knew that he was dying, and he was just in awe of the fact that the last year of his life had been so productive, because he went through a phase when he was fighting, he had some health issues before the last one, and where he wasn't writing, and then all of a sudden everything came together, and he had this amazing Lazarus and the album and just everything that I think was really lovely, and I was so lucky to have our paths cross again in a major way toward the end there.
Were you surprised at the outpouring when he passed, that there were so many people that seemed to connect with him?
No, I mean, I think, no, I wasn't, because, first of all, he was around for a long time, and I think that his spirit of, I really admire artists who have a success and they don't just keep doing that over and over. And he was so experimental, and he was so brave, And at the same time, you know, I think he was a survivor story, but he also was very joyful. I mean, he was very celebratory, and he was all about, you know, don't dream it, be it, the Rocky Horror Show. That's why that's been around forever. It's about, you know, authenticity, and I think he gave permission to so many people to experiment and to embrace their feminine side or their masculine side. You know, this, I never saw him as androgynous. All the people that I really, really admire are men who have made peace with their feminine and women who've made peace with their masculine. I think it's, for an artist, you can't be held back by those definitions. That's why, you know, this whole fluid time that we're living in, I think, is just so inspiring and so exciting for everybody, even if you're not transitioning, because it just blows out all of the definitions of what a man has to be or a woman has to be or what you have to feel or what you're allowed. Or marriage, you know, gay marriage means that heterosexual marriage is no more has to be defined so clearly in terms of, well, whose job is what. And so, you know, instead of being afraid, I think, you know, we've just gotten that many more crayons in our box, and we can just go crazy outside the lines, and it's an exciting, exciting time to be alive and just see. I mean, I guess in some way it's scary because the things are being deconstructed, but what you're getting in return is so much more definitions and choices. And I think he was a leader of that in a lot of ways, and very, you know, brilliant, fucking brilliant in so many ways, and very clever in terms of having his, you know, having his fingers on the pulse of new things. Very practical. He in terms of money and stuff, he was no fool in understanding how to do that. But yeah, he was pretty special.
You have The Hunger and Rocky Horror are two films that have really lasted, really have a lasting impact. Hindsight is 2020. Would you have expected that? Were you expecting that when you made those films? They weren't really successful when they came out, were they? I mean, certainly not Rocky Horror.
The Rocky Horror Show, they didn't even know where they put it for years. It never came out. Never even, they didn't know what to do with that one. And you know, if you do a film and it doesn't cost much money, and that was like $1 million or less, they're not going to spend money when they don't know what to do with it. I mean, how could you know how to market that film? It never had existed before. And you know, often these people have certain experiences with films, and they put your film into the slot, and there was no slot that existed for the Rocky Horror Show. That was for sure. Still. Oh, I don't know. Now it's going to be on TV. I mean, I don't know. Now it doesn't seem quite so extreme, but at the time, it was amazing. And what they did was some guys at Fox just started leaking it to gay cinemas and to art houses and those late shows. And then, you know, from there it turned into some weird ass, I don't know what, you know, that just does not stop. The Hunger, I don't think was as financially successful. The Hunger definitely expanded the demographic that people were interested in me, but I don't know what it did. It was, in terms of the stylistically, it was really something that now isn't so unusual, but at that time was, you know, Tony Scott's first film. And he brought all of his commercial awareness, and he was incredibly collaborative, and it was a funny experience, but great to do, yeah.
Well, I was one of those people who went to Rocky Horror when it was at the Waverly and 8th Street Playhouse, and it did seem out of another place and time and hard to really understand.
Well, it's kind of a ceremony, isn't it? It was a safe haven for people who felt, you know, outside of the normal way to be accepted. They could go. There was a community there. And what was really weird, when I was working with Natalie Portman, she was like 16 or I guess maybe 17, and we went. They wanted to go see the Rocky Horror Show. We were in L.A. I hadn't been for years and years. I took Molly Ringwald. Actually, Here, she wanted to see it. And Nureyev, that was the oddest night. Nureyev, Molly Ringwald, and myself went to the Rocky Horror Show. So in LA, Thora Birch went, who made the mistake of saying she had never seen the film before, so they just completely harassed her. My daughter, who was like 15, and Natalie, who was, I guess, 17 or 18. And the people who were in front of the screen acting it out, for anyone who hasn't been, as that's going on, people are in front and they're in costume and they're acting out exactly what's going on the screen. And they knew I was there, and it was a big deal, and so I talked to them, and their parents had met doing it. It was like a family tradition. Their children were now acting this out. That's how long it had been, and that's how strange this country is. I was like, that's so cool. Yeah.
Don't throw any toast if anyone has any. Please don't throw any toast.
I must say that the New York crew was much more disciplined. The LA was just like being in a room with Tourette people. They were just like, everyone was screaming everything on top of each other, and it was, I don't know what was going on. But the New York was very much like a mass.
It was a very disciplined thing, and you had to know your part, and if you came as that part, you did not do the other part. That was your part, and I remember that very well. But very New York. I always thought of it as a very New York thing, just because I'm from New York, so that's maybe my own bias. But
no, I
always
think
felt
I don't know, actually. I don't know if anyone's ever figured out, but it definitely, they haven't been able to come up. I know The Room, people have tried to start something with that, The Room, but that's a really bad film.
The Room?
Do you know The Room?
You mean the drama that just happened?
No.
I was like,
That's
why?
Room.
Oh, Room.
That's
okay,
Room.
Sorry. I was
This
like,
is
that's a
The
horrible
Room.
movie to do it like that.
No. Yeah, let's all pretend we're the kid that's locked up. You roll in the mattress next, you know. No, it's called The Room, and it's a kind of vanity project, and it's pretty, you know, I don't know if anyone here knows. And I thought that would maybe end up kind of being it. But
I have a question that someone sent on social media. I just want to ask, and then I'll let you go there. But if you could give any advice to your younger self, what would it be?
I would say make your mistakes faster. I'm a big believer in making mistakes. I really encourage my kids to know that mistakes are so important and really help you figure out who you're not and what you want and what you don't want. But I feel like I could have gotten the point quicker sometimes and done it faster. So maybe that. The other thing, when I see these reels of, you know, I just had I went to this thing, Cinecon, in Vegas a few days ago, which is a gathering of.
It's hard to say what
It's like Little League. Everyone gets an award, like, you know, most improved player, best icon, most popular, the new breakout, new star, old star. I mean, like, I can't tell you how many awards they give out. Anyway, I got an award, and they do a film, you know, of your career, you know, and you see yourself. And I thought, I really didn't understand that I was pretty. You know, I didn't get it really when I was then. I wish I had appreciated the way that I looked. I didn't really think of myself that way. I would have used it better if I'd known, and I didn't really know. I didn't get it, you know, but I think maybe just embracing mistakes and moving on much quicker would have been the only thing that I would say.
Did you have a mentor? Did you have someone that you could talk to when you were coming up?
No. I didn't have a press person. I didn't have a manager. It never even occurred to me. And I had a woman who discovered me, but she died tragically very young. But she discovered Sylvester Stallone, Chris Sarandon, me, and Perry King. And she had gone to the Long Wharf and saw Chris Sarandon in a play. Actually, her name was Jane Oliver, and she's the reason that I'm in the business, because she saw Chris, and she asked him to come in and do an audition, and he needed somebody to do a scene with him, and so I did it with him. And she said, well, why don't both of you come back? And he went off to do summer stock, and she said, why don't both of you come back? And I came with him in the fall, and they sent me up she sent me up she was just an individual, and I went up for this film called Joe, which was the first sex film that this company had done, first non-pornographic film that Canon had done. And they asked me to do an improv, and I did it, and they talked a little bit, and then they said, okay, and I called her, and she said, just leave, don't sign anything, don't do anything, just come back. And so from that point on, she passed away by the time I did Pretty Baby of cancer very early, but I don't even think I'd be in the business if it weren't for her, because I never would have had the wherewithal to go to an agency or something. She really just found me, and I think because I wasn't desperate to do it, it really made it easier. I was just like, oh, well, this is fun. I can pay off my loan with this, and oh, I got another one. That's really fun. Then I went on a soap opera, and when I was on the soap opera, I learned how to work with cameras, and because it's kind of live, but with cameras.
Did you have a question there? Yep. Here, down here, Harrison.
Hi. You mentioned that you didn't know you were pretty. The film Dead Man Walking, I felt that the camera really loved you, and I'm just wondering if you could talk a bit about the character or the experience of making the film.
First, let me tell you that was Roger Deakins, and who's a genius. I mean, he's only gotten 45 nominations and never, or something like that. Because he had to figure, it was very interesting about that film, well, besides the fact that I decided not to wear makeup or, and have a bad haircut and everything else, which is half the trick, by the way, to get an Academy Award. The minute you uglify yourself, just look, if you either play someone really sick or disabled or you uglify yourself, that's 50% right there. Charlize Theron, just go back over the people that have won. My Left Foot, you name it, they're always like, Rain Man, what other ones can we think of?
Uglify is definitely...
Uglify. And so anyway, but he had to figure out, we had different widths of wire to look through and to decide, whether you were inside when you were covering us or outside. It's a long time sitting with Sean at that thing, and there were a lot more scenes outside because we thought, with other things going on, because we never thought that would hold. And that was a remarkable experience because I met Sister Helen. I got the book. I read about it. I read it, and I was in New Orleans doing The Tail End of the Client, and I met her for dinner. She didn't have the faintest idea which one of Thelma and Louise I was. She said, but I came highly recommended by Amnesty International because of some of the stuff I had done, and so that's why she was interested. And I just loved her, and she just said, okay, fine, you take it. So with a handshake, the book was mine. And I went back, and I tried to get Tim interested, and he just was not interested. He wanted to do Cradle Will Rock. He had the company that had done Bob Roberts and had done very well with Bob Roberts, and he just was not interested. And so it was about a year, and finally, I was turning things down, and there weren't good parts, and finally, I just had like a little mini tantrum. I remember on 7th Avenue, and just said, are you going to do this, or am I going to give it to somebody else, or what do you want to do? It's like, all right, let me read it. And then when he read it, it kind of got into his imagination. We went away to Italy, and we were staying. He did like a first draft of that and a first draft of Cradle Will Rock and gave them to Gore Vidal, who is the godfather of my youngest child. He and Bob Altman shared our youngest child. And Gore read them and said, don't do either of them. No one's going to see a movie with dead in the title, which was true. Nobody had been able, don't do either of them. So that wasn't very helpful. And then, I don't know, he came back, and he just started to get more. Sister Helen by that time had already become a friend, because even before we did it, she was staying at our house if she came to New York to talk or whatever. So I felt a huge, well, it was funny because I remember Tim said to me after we were already in pre-production, he said, now, you don't think this is about her, right? Like, this was a conversation pretty late in the Now, what if I'd said yes? And I said, no, I think that it's, I think it's a love story with this other political thing happening. And he was like, a love story, what? And, but he was, of course, he's very political. And so there were a number of scripts and a lot of fighting, a lot of stuff, and then trying to get Sean. But I really, that's the only movie I've ever prayed every morning to kind of just surrender, because I felt it was so, to make the wrong film of that subject was, you ran a risk of, I felt like it was something that needed to be talked about, but to go off in some way could have really been bad, or to not do justice to her, or to glamorize. There were so many ways for it to go wrong, and God bless him. He did such a great job of combining the characters, getting rid of the electrocutions and making it, the most humane way to kill someone, and not making him innocent. Because when we were taking it around places, people said, well, he's going to get out, right? Or he's innocent, right? Or they have a love story, right? And it was like none of the above. And so Harvey Weinstein turned it down. Nobody wanted to do that movie the way that it was. But it was a low budget, and it was very important that it be the most humane way to kill a guilty person, and examine it that way. Where does it come in? And I learned so much from all the religious that I met, and this, for me, the question of unconditional love. And you certainly can love your kids unconditionally, and religious love unconditionally like Jesus, but I don't know if it's even right for you to love your spouse unconditionally. I don't know. But for me, that was what it was about, was this love story of redemption set in the midst of the death penalty, but really about these people. And Sean was the only person I could think of who was simultaneously scary and sympathetic. You could believe he would kill someone, and you could believe that you'd want to go to bed with him. So how do you find that in people? It's really, really tough. And he was just a joy to work with. Because it was so intense for the two of us to be so connected. Sometimes he'd be strapped in, and I'd stay there with him the whole time and help him smoke a cigarette. It was, looking back, crazy. Because we did all of those scenes together in New York, across the street from our house. And that's when Tim said, oh, I get it now, it is a love story. But so that was nice to be able to chart it so that there weren't any repetitions, and so you could really understand in order. And also, I don't think I'd ever had a film where you were really counting down the days till your co-star was killed, which was very strange. Yeah.
And we have time for one more question back there.
You're very inspiring in many ways, but one of them is that you're very political as well.
I was waiting for this question.
I was waiting too.
First of all, where do you get your energy, and what kinds of things are you most passionate about right now?
I, like some of you, came of age in the late 60s, the early 70s, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, but also a time when you could turn on the TV and actually see what was going on. You saw the South being desegregated. You saw what was going on in Vietnam, and of course they never made that mistake again. Corporate media has changed the way we get our information, but at that time, being in college in DC and watching DC burn and having presidents being assassinated and everything, in a way, is so much less informed in other ways than kids, the millennials that are online all the time. And got information, for instance, with Bernie Sanders way before anybody else did, because it wasn't being covered. But it was just it just seemed perfectly natural to be arrested and to partake in those things. And then it, God bless you, never really stopped for me. And, but I didn't connect public making speeches or anything. I'm still not even comfortable with that. But, I remember one of the first things I did as an actor connected to media was ERA and Marlo Thomas. We were at the big library, and she said, "You have to go out and say something." And I was like, "Well, I don't have anything to say." And she said, "Well, it doesn't matter what you say. This is how it gets on the news. You have to just go out there." And I remember going out and just seeing like 30 microphones, and I kind of remember what I said, but it wasn't particularly brilliant. But I realized very early on that especially my specialty became people that didn't have a voice, issues that nobody was covering, which is why recently I went to Greece. You know, the dialogue, the conversation about the refugees was so hateful and so fear-based, and I was like, who are these people? Why are they there? Where are they trying to get to? What are their jobs? You know, people deserve to be humanized, not reduced to concepts. And if I go, I can maybe get interviews with people and get that put on somewhere where people will at least have an opportunity to hear who these people are, because nobody's talking to them. This was right before Christmas, around that period where Trump was just crazy about the refugees. But early on, I realized that, you know, when I went to Nicaragua in I guess it was 83, when we hadn't said we hadn't admitted that we were blowing things up over there, but I went with a delegation of women, not anybody in the business, but just over there again to bring baby food and milk and to find out what was happening when we destabilized a government. And I learned that the value of being able to place pictures and have, you know, whether it was a school strike or whether or not it was a homeless situation, all people who really just didn't have anybody to explain their plight, that it was a way of using my celebrity instead of feeling like I was being used by it. And there is a lot of, you know, I remember somebody, when we were trying to get the Haitians out of Guantanamo, and I was on Phil Donahue and with some other people, and you know, somebody said, well, why should we listen to, you know, you have illegitimate children, and why should we listen to anything you have to say? And I said, you absolutely should. You shouldn't, any more than you should care who I sleep with or what's happening with my children. I mean, you're right. Why would that count? But unfortunately, it does. So if you're going to be interested in that other stuff, then I'm going to at least be able to tell you that there are these people that are HIV positive and how hypocritical it is not to let them in when they have places to go. You know what I mean? It's just like there's bad branding for so many of these situations, and if you can in some way draw attention to it, and when that didn't work and getting arrested didn't work, when I went on the Academy Awards and Clinton had said he would get them out, and now they were swallowing Drano and were trying to kill themselves and were lying in a field and were on a hunger strike. I really tossed and turned about whether or not to say something at the Academy Awards, but I learned that always the things that I've regretted the most are the things that I have not done or said. You can always apologize, you know, but when you go home and you think, why didn't I have the courage to, you know, there I was, and there have been some times when that's happened, and I thought, this is not, we fought about what exactly we would say, how long it would be, we didn't tell anybody, we were trying to protect other people, and damned if they didn't get out like 2 days later, because embarrassment is one of the strongest weapons you have in these situations, and that's a big audience, the Academy Awards. But we were banned for until I got nominated. Ouch. But there was a lot of bad mail. It was like the lead up to the war, you know, asking questions in that situation was really painful. That's one of the reasons I love Bernie Sanders so much, is that when he stood on the floor and said what he said in that atmosphere of such fear and paranoia, and where you were labeled a Osama bin Laden lover every time my name came up, and my kids, my life was threatened, and all these different things were coming down, you know, and to see somebody say what he said at that time in those circumstances, I just remember being so moved.
Well, don't forget to vote tomorrow.
please
Vote tomorrow
vote.
and see this film Friday.
Oh yeah,
It's
go
opening
back
up.
and see it.
Yes.
Please go back and.
This
I
is
feel like
only
I
a
know you.
taste.
I want you to see it now.
It's only a taste, and we want to thank Susan for coming. And our chaplain gala is Monday with Morgan Freeman, and we're very happy that Susan is a past recipient of our
And I just
chaplain
want to
award.
say my sincere congratulations to Lincoln Center, because when that happened was when everything was being canceled that I was supposed to do, and they went through with that award show at a time when I was being blacklisted basically and ostracized, and the United Way canceled an event that I had with these little girls in Florida, like just across the board. That's when the Baseball Hall of Fame wouldn't let us in, and all kinds of weird stuff was coming down, and Lincoln Center stood by me at that particular time and went through with it. So that shows, I was so appreciative of that at that time.
Thank you. Thank you all.